never thought a simple company breakfast could make me feel so invisible. My name is Sarah. I'm 33 years old, and I'd been working at Morrison & Associates for almost 6 years. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. I arrived at the office early, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another day. The email had come the previous Friday. Annual company breakfast, celebrating our team's success. Everyone was invited to the conference room at 8 a.m. sharp. I'd been looking forward to it all weekend. After working so hard on the Henderson account, staying late, missing dinners, basically living and breathing those spreadsheets for 3 months, I thought maybe I'd finally get some recognition. When I walked into that conference room, the energy hit me immediately. My colleagues were clustered in their usual groups, laughing and chatting animatedly. There was Jennifer from marketing, perfectly put together, surrounded by her admirers. There was Marcus from sales, telling one of his loud stories. And there was David from IT, discussing some system upgrade with senior managers. I grabbed a plate with fruit and a croissant, then looked around for somewhere to sit. That's when it started. The subtle but unmistakable feeling of being overlooked. I approached Jennifer's group with a smile, ready to join their conversation about the upcoming product launch. But as I got closer, they seemed to naturally close their circle tighter, their backs turning slightly toward me. "Good morning, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice bright. A few polite nods, some forced smiles. But the conversation continued as if I hadn't spoken. They were discussing weekend plans, Jennifer's skiing trip, Marcus's new car, David's home renovation. I stood there holding my plate, waiting for a natural break to contribute something, anything, but the break never came. After several awkward minutes, I quietly stepped away, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I tried another group, some newer employees I'd helped train over the past year. Surely they'd remember how I'd stayed after hours to walk them through our systems, how I'd answered their endless questions with patience. "Hey guys, how's everyone doing?" I asked, approaching their table. "Oh, hi, Sarah," came the lukewarm response from Tom, one of the junior analysts I'd mentored. But immediately after acknowledging me, he turned back to his conversation with Lisa from accounting. They were discussing some restaurant downtown, making plans for lunch later that week. I waited for an invitation that never came. The pattern repeated throughout that breakfast. Every group I approached had an invisible barrier around it. Conversations would pause when I joined, then resume at topics that excluded me. People would look past me when I spoke, or give those polite but dismissive responses that meant they weren't really listening. I found myself standing alone by the coffee station, watching my colleagues laugh and bond over shared jokes and plans I wasn't part of. The Henderson account's success, my success, that I'd been so proud of seemed meaningless in this room. Nobody asked about it. Nobody seemed to care about the 70-hour weeks I'd put in or the creative solutions I'd developed. The worst part wasn't just being ignored. It was realizing this wasn't new. This was just the first time I was really noticing it. How many other company events had I attended where I'd been pushed to the margins? As the breakfast continued, I retreated to a corner table, picking at my food, while watching the room buzz with energy that never reached me. I thought about my track record. 6 years of consistent performance. Never a single client complaint, always meeting deadlines. I'd saved the company thousands by catching contract errors others missed. I'd trained half the people in this room. Yet here I was, feeling like a ghost at my own company's celebration. The conversation at the table next to me caught my attention. Rebecca from HR was talking to senior managers about workplace culture initiatives and recognizing talent that might be flying under the radar. "We really need to focus on our quiet performers who just put their heads down and do excellent work," Rebecca was saying. I almost laughed. Here was someone literally describing me while looking right past me. I wanted to wave my hands and say, "Hello, quiet performer right here." But instead I just sat there, my coffee growing cold. At 8:47 a.m., I started planning my escape. But then something strange happened. Rebecca kept glancing at her phone with an expression I couldn't read. Excited? Nervous? Her eyes eventually landed on me before she looked away quickly. My phone buzzed. Sarah, can you please stay after breakfast? Need to speak with you briefly. Rebecca. My heart sank. After feeling invisible all morning, now I was about to get fired. At exactly 9 a.m., people started filtering out of the conference room, chatting about their upcoming meetings and weekend plans. I remained seated, my hands fidgeting with my coffee cup, watching Rebecca gather her papers with what seemed like nervous energy. Mr. Morrison was still there too, along with 2 other people I didn't immediately recognize, a woman in an expensive-looking navy suit, and a man with silver hair who carried himself with obvious authority. Sarah, Rebecca called out once the room had mostly emptied. Could you join us up here, please? I stood up on shaky legs, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Had I made a critical error on the Henderson account? Was there some compliance issue I'd missed? Maybe they'd found out about the time I'd taken a longer lunch to handle my mom's medical appointment. As I walked towards the front of the room, I noticed that Mr. Morrison was smiling, not his usual polite, professional smile, but something warmer, more genuine. The woman in the navy suit was studying some documents intently, while the silver-haired man was looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Sarah, please have a seat, Rebecca said, gesturing to a chair. I'd like you to meet some people. This is Linda Chen from our parent company, Meridian Financial Group. She indicated the woman in the navy suit, who looked up and extended her hand with a firm, confident grip. And this is Robert Hayes, Meridian's Chief Operating Officer, Rebecca continued. The silver-haired man stepped forward, his handshake equally firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. My confusion must have been written all over my face, because Mr. Morrison chuckled. Sarah, I can see you're wondering what this is all about. Trust me, it's nothing to worry about. Linda Chen opened a folder and pulled out what looked like several printed emails. Sarah, we've been conducting a comprehensive review of our subsidiary company's performance over the past year. Part of that review involves identifying exceptional talent that might not be getting the recognition they deserve at the local level. I blinked, still not understanding where this was going. Recognition? Exceptional talent? Were they talking about someone else? Robert Hayes spoke up, his voice carrying decades of corporate authority. The Henderson account caught our attention, Sarah, not just because of the successful outcome, but because of the innovative approach used to solve what had been a persistent problem for that client. When we dug deeper into the details, Linda continued, we discovered that the creative financial restructuring solution, the one that saved Henderson Industries over $2 million and secured their 5-year contract extension, came entirely from you. I felt like the room was spinning slightly. Yes, I worked on that account, but it was a team effort. No, it wasn't, Mr. Morrison interrupted gently but firmly. Sarah, we've done our homework. The initial strategy memo, the risk assessment models, the alternative financing structures, they all came from you. Marcus presented the final proposal to the client, but the substance was entirely your work. Rebecca was smiling now, and I realized that her nervous energy earlier hadn't been about delivering bad news. It had been excitement she was trying to contain. Sarah, your work on the Henderson account has been used as a case study at 3 other Meridian subsidiaries. Companies in Chicago, Denver, and Atlanta have implemented variations of your approach. Which brings us to why we're here, Robert Hayes said, leaning forward slightly. Meridian Financial Group is opening a new strategic solutions division. We need someone to head up the financial innovation team, someone who can think outside traditional frameworks and develop creative approaches to complex client challenges. The words hit me like a physical force. Head up a team? Financial innovation? I looked around the room, half expecting to see someone else who had quietly joined the meeting. We're offering you the position of Director of Strategic Financial Solutions, Linda Chen said, sliding a formal document across the table. The position is based here initially, but you'd be working with our entire network of companies across the country. The salary is $165,000, plus performance bonuses, plus equity participation in Meridian's growth. I stared at the document, the numbers swimming in my vision. Director, $165,000. That was more than double my current $78,000 salary. I don't understand, I managed to say. How did you even know about my work specifically? Mr. Morrison smiled. Sarah, do you remember about 2 months ago when Henderson's CEO sent that thank you email after we completed their restructuring? Well, he also sent a separate email directly to me, specifically mentioning that while he'd worked with Marcus on presentations, there was someone named Sarah who had developed the actual solutions. He said it was the most innovative financial thinking he'd encountered in 20 years. Linda Chen reached into her briefcase and pulled out another folder, this one much thicker than the first. Sarah, what you don't know is that we've been quietly observing your work for the past 3 months. Not just the Henderson account, everything. She opened the folder, revealing what looked like a comprehensive analysis of my entire career at Morrison & Associates. There were spreadsheets, performance metrics, client feedback forms I'd never even seen, and detailed breakdowns of every project I'd worked on. The Westfield manufacturing turnaround last year, Robert Hayes said, reading from the documents. You identified $800,000 in unnecessary operational expenses that had been overlooked for 3 years. The Martinez Family Trust restructuring, your estate planning modifications saved them $1.2 million in taxes over 5 years. The Peterson Group merger analysis. Your due diligence caught 3 potential compliance issues that could have cost everyone millions in penalties. I sat there in stunned silence as they continued listing project after project, detail after detail of work I'd done that I thought had gone largely unnoticed. They had numbers, outcomes, client testimonials, a complete picture of my contributions that was far more comprehensive than anything I could have compiled myself. The pattern became impossible to ignore, Linda continued. In every case, you were the analyst who caught the critical details, developed the innovative solutions, or identified the opportunities that others missed. Yet in most cases, credit was being shared with team leaders or assigned to department heads. Mr. Morrison looked somewhat uncomfortable. Sarah, I have to apologize. It's clear that we haven't done a good job of recognizing your individual contributions here at Morrison & Associates. That's something we need to address moving forward. But that's exactly why this opportunity is so important, Robert Hayes interjected. At Meridian's Strategic Solutions Division, you won't be in the background anymore. You'll be leading the team, presenting directly to C-level executives and getting full credit for the innovations you develop. Rebecca slid another document across the table. This is the complete job description and benefits package. Beyond the salary we mentioned, there's a $20,000 signing bonus, full health and dental coverage, 4 weeks of vacation, and a professional development budget of $10,000 annually for conferences, training, or continuing education. I picked up the job description with trembling hands. Director of Strategic Financial Solutions. Team of 8 senior analysts reporting directly to me. Travel to Meridian locations nationwide. Collaboration with Fortune 500 clients. The responsibility was enormous, but as I read through the duties and expectations, I realized they were describing things I was already doing, just on a much larger scale and with proper recognition. I need to ask, I said, looking up from the documents. Why now? Why me? There are people in this company with more experience, more visibility, more politics. Linda Chen interrupted with a slight smile. Sarah, we're not looking for someone who knows how to play corporate games. We're looking for someone who produces results. Your track record speaks for itself. Robert Hayes leaned back in his chair. We've actually interviewed several candidates from various companies, including some with more traditional executive experience. But none of them had your combination of analytical creativity and practical problem-solving ability. Most importantly, none of them had your track record of consistent innovation under pressure. There's something else, Mr. Morrison added. James Henderson wasn't the only client who reached out to me about you specifically. Over the past year, I've received similar calls or emails from 4 other clients, all praising your work and asking if you were available for additional consulting projects. My mind was reeling. 4 other clients. I barely remembered having direct contact with most of our clients. I usually worked behind the scenes while account managers handled the presentations and meetings. The Thompson Group, the Riverside Development Corporation, Atlantic Logistics, and North Shore Medical Group. Rebecca read from her notes. All of them specifically requested you for future projects after working with our company. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. For 6 years, I'd been sitting in this same building, doing my work, feeling invisible and undervalued. And all this time, there had been this parallel narrative happening that I knew nothing about. Clients praising my work, executives at parent companies taking notice, opportunities being created that I never could have imagined. As the meeting concluded and the executives began packing their materials, I walked out of that conference room in a complete daze. The same hallway where I'd felt so invisible just 2 hours earlier now seemed different somehow, brighter, full of possibility. I clutched the job offer documents against my chest like a lifeline. But as I made my way back to my desk, I realized the breakfast crowd hadn't completely dispersed. Several of my colleagues were still lingering in the break room, continuing their conversations from earlier. And that's when I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I don't know why they kept Sarah in there so long, Jennifer from marketing was saying, her voice carrying that false concern that barely masked gossip. She looked pretty nervous when Rebecca called her over. Probably finally addressing her attitude problem, Marcus replied with a chuckle. I mean, she's competent enough, but she's always been kind of antisocial, you know? Never really fits in with the team dynamic. Maybe they're moving her to a different department, suggested Tom, the junior analyst I'd spent countless hours training. Somewhere where she doesn't have to interact with clients as much. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to them casually dissect my personality and predict my professional demise. These were the same people who had ignored me at breakfast, who had made me feel invisible and worthless. And here they were, assuming that any meeting with HR must be bad news for me. Honestly, I've always thought she was a little too intense, Jennifer continued. Like, we get it. You're good with numbers, but there's more to business than just spreadsheets, you know? That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a liberating way. I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to try to fit into their conversations or win their respect. I had something much better, recognition from people who actually mattered. I walked past the break room toward my desk, and Jennifer called out, "Oh, Sarah, how did it go? Everything okay?" The false concern in her voice was almost comical now. I turned around with the biggest, most genuine smile I'd had in years. "Actually, Jennifer, everything is fantastic. Better than I could have imagined." She looked confused by my cheerful response. "Oh, that's good. What did they want to talk to you about?" I paused for a moment, savoring the irony. They offered me a promotion. Actually, more than a promotion, a complete career change. I'm going to be heading up a new division. The break room went silent. Marcus stopped mid-sip of his coffee. Tom's jaw literally dropped, and Jennifer's expression shifted from fake concern to genuine shock. "A division?" Marcus stammered. "What kind of division?" "Strategic Financial Solutions for Meridian Financial Group," I said, letting each word sink in. "I'll be managing a team of senior analysts and working directly with Fortune 500 clients across the country." "Meridian?" Tom's voice cracked slightly. "But that's our parent company. That's like corporate headquarters level." "Yes, it is," I confirmed, still smiling. "They've apparently been tracking my work for months. The Henderson account that I developed the strategy for, it's being used as a case study at other companies now." Jennifer's face had gone pale. "The Henderson account. But Marcus presented that to the client." "I presented it," Marcus corrected quietly, finally understanding the distinction. "Sarah developed it." The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could see them all recalculating, trying to square this new information with their perception of me as the quiet, antisocial analyst who didn't quite fit in. "The salary is $165,000 plus bonuses," I added, because I was feeling petty and because I knew exactly what they were all making, plus equity participation and a professional development budget. Tom made a small, choking sound. That was more than twice what any of them earned. including Marcus with all his sales commissions. Rebecca appeared at the end of the hallway, her face glowing with excitement. "Sarah, I'm so glad I caught you. Mr. Morrison would like to schedule a brief meeting with you Monday morning to discuss transition plans." As Rebecca walked away, I turned back to my stunned colleagues. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that the silence felt almost surreal. 3 weeks later, I walked into the gleaming offices of Meridian Financial Group's Strategic Solutions Division, wearing a new navy suit that cost more than I used to spend on clothes in 6 months. The contrast with my last day at Morrison and Associates couldn't have been more dramatic. That final week at my old job had been surreal. Word about my promotion had spread through the office like wildfire, and suddenly everyone wanted to be my friend. The same people who had ignored me at the company breakfast were now stopping by my desk to congratulate me, asking for a career advice, and wondering if there might be opportunities for them at Meridian. Jennifer from marketing had actually asked if I could put in a good word for her with my new contacts. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Marcus had been almost pathetically eager to claim credit for mentoring me, suddenly remembering all the times he'd collaborated with me on projects. Tom had asked if I might consider bringing him along as part of my new team. But the most satisfying moment had come during my farewell lunch. Morrison had organized a small gathering in the conference room, the same room where I'd felt so invisible just a month earlier. This time, though, I was the center of attention. "I have to be honest," he had said, looking directly at me. "We failed Sarah. We had exceptional talent right under our noses, and we didn't recognize it properly. That's something we're going to change moving forward, but unfortunately for us, Sarah is moving on to bigger and better things." He had then presented me with a letter of recommendation, so glowing it made me blush. "I've asked Sarah if Meridian would consider a consulting arrangement with Morrison and Associates," he announced. "We'd love to have access to her expertise, even if we can't have her full-time anymore." The faces around that table told the whole story. These were people who had written me off as antisocial, too intense, not a team player. Now they were learning that I was so valuable that our old company wanted to pay my new company just for access to my thinking. Now, sitting in my new corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, I could hardly believe the transformation. My nameplate read, "Sarah Mitchell, Director of Strategic Financial Solutions." My team of 8 senior analysts, each of them earning more than I had made just a month ago, looked to me for guidance and direction. My first major project had been exactly what Linda Chen had promised, a Fortune 100 manufacturing company with complex international financial structures that weren't working efficiently. Within 2 weeks, I had identified $15 million in annual savings and developed a restructuring plan that would improve their cash flow by 35%. The client's CEO had called Robert Hayes personally to praise the work. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we were hoping for," he had said. Sarah saw angles that our previous consultants completely missed. But the most rewarding part wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the respect. In meetings, people listened when I spoke. My ideas were implemented, not buried or reassigned to someone else. When I walked into a room, I was seen as the expert, the problem solver, the person with the answers. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Saw your LinkedIn update about the Peterson Industries project. Mom is so proud she's been showing the article to everyone at the grocery store." I laughed, remembering how uncertain I'd felt just a few weeks ago. The Peterson Industries case study had been published in Financial Innovation Quarterly, with my name as the lead author. It was the first time I'd ever been published, and seeing my ideas in print, attributed to me alone, felt incredible. There was a knock on my office door. "Come in," I called out. It was James Henderson. Yes, the same James Henderson whose account had started this whole chain of events. He was in town for meetings and had asked to stop by personally. "Sarah, I had to meet you face to face," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Your work saved my company. Not just money. You saved us from a path that would have been disastrous." After he left, I sat back in my chair and thought about that company breakfast that had started everything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success so complete and undeniable that it rewrites the entire story. 6 months into my new role, I received an invitation that made me smile wider than I had in years. Morrison and Associates was hosting their annual awards dinner, and they wanted me as their keynote speaker. The irony was perfect. The same company where I'd felt invisible now wanted me to be the main attraction. I stood before a room of 200 people, including all my former colleagues who had ignored me at that fateful breakfast. Jennifer sat in the front row, hanging on my every word. Marcus was frantically taking notes on his phone. Tom looked like he was trying to memorize everything I said. Success isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, I told the audience. It's about being the most valuable one. Sometimes the people doing the most important work are the ones you barely notice, until their absence would cost you everything. After my speech, the line of people wanting to talk to me stretched across the room. Former colleagues who had never given me a second glance were now asking for my business card, hoping for connections, begging for advice. The transformation was so complete it felt surreal. But the real validation came 3 days later. Linda Cheng called me into her office with news that left me speechless. "Sarah, I've just gotten off the phone with the board of directors," she said, her face glowing with excitement. "They want to offer you the position of Vice President of Strategic Innovation for the entire Meridian Corporation. You'd be overseeing financial strategy for all our subsidiary companies across North America." Vice President, at 33 years old, less than a year after feeling invisible at a company breakfast. The salary is $285,000 base, plus performance bonuses that could double that, she continued. You'd have your own executive team, a corner office on the 40th floor, and direct reporting to the CEO. I thought about that morning when I'd sat alone in the break room, watching my colleagues laugh and plan activities I wasn't invited to. I thought about Marcus taking credit for my presentations, Jennifer dismissing my contributions, Tom forgetting all the hours I'd spent training him. "There's one more thing," Linda added. "The board specifically mentioned that they want you to lead our new initiative for identifying and developing overlooked talent across all our companies. They said if we missed someone of your caliber for 6 years, we're probably missing others too." I accepted the position immediately. The announcement went out company-wide the following week. My phone didn't stop buzzing with congratulations from people across the corporate network, and a few desperate messages from Morrison and Associates employees, hoping I'd remember them fondly. On my first day as vice president, I sat in my new office on the 40th floor, looking out at the city skyline. My assistant knocked and entered with a stack of resumes. "These are applications for your new team," she said. "HR has already done the initial screening, but they wanted you to personally review the final candidates." As I flipped through the resumes, one caught my attention. It was from a quiet analyst at one of our Denver subsidiaries. Her supervisor's notes described her as competent but not particularly social, and good with numbers but lacks leadership presence. The description sounded painfully familiar, but buried in her file were client testimonials praising her innovative solutions and problem-solving skills. There were cost savings she'd identified, process improvements she'd developed, and complex analyses she'd completed, all credited to her department heads or team leaders. I picked up my phone and dialed Denver. "This is Sarah Mitchell, VP of Strategic Innovation. I need to speak with Emma Rodriguez immediately." 20 minutes later, I was on a video call with a young woman who looked exactly like I had felt a year ago, brilliant, undervalued, and invisible. "Emma," I said, watching her nervous expression, "I have a question for you. How would you feel about moving to corporate headquarters to head up our new emerging markets division?" The look of shock and disbelief on her face was identical to what I'd felt in that conference room. But unlike me, she wouldn't have to wait 6 years to be seen. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story wasn't really about revenge or justice. It was about recognition, being seen for who I truly was, instead of who people assumed I was. And now I had the power to make sure that other talented, overlooked people wouldn't have to wait as long as I did. The best part about rising to the top isn't looking down at the people who ignored you. It's reaching back down to pull up the ones who remind you of yourself. The quiet ones, the brilliant ones, the ones everyone else walks past without seeing. Sometimes the most invisible people are the ones with the clearest vision of what needs to change. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and excellent enough, you get the chance to change it yourself.